She was my friend's mom, confident, composed, the kind of woman who never lost control. But the moment she looked at me with that quiet, daring smile and said, "You're bold, and I like that," something in the air changed. It wasn't a challenge. It was an invitation, to feel, to risk, to see how far honesty could take us before the world noticed. I wasn't supposed to see her that day. I was only dropping by to return Ethan's camera, a quick stop, a few words, then gone. But when the door opened and Claire stood there instead of him, the afternoon suddenly felt slower. She looked effortlessly graceful, a soft gray sweater falling over one shoulder, a mug of coffee still in her hand. A faint trace of vanilla and something floral lingered in the air as she smiled. "Ethan's not home," she said, her voice warm but even. "But you can come in if you'd like." I hesitated, out of politeness, maybe, but she'd already turned, leaving the door open behind her. The sound of her footsteps led me through the hallway, where sunlight filtered through sheer curtains and danced across the framed photos on the wall. Family memories, old trips, a life that felt far removed from my own. She was in the kitchen, rinsing a glass. The air smelled of brewed coffee and rain-soaked leaves drifting through the open window. She glanced over her shoulder. "You still into photography?" she asked, nodding toward the camera in my hand. "Trying to be," I replied. "You've got some great shots up on your walls." Her lips curved, faint but genuine. "Those are mine." I hadn't expected that. "They're beautiful," I said, and meant it. She looked down for a second, maybe to hide the small smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "You notice things," she said quietly. "Most people don't." I shrugged, leaning on the counter. "Guess I'm just bold enough to say what others only think." That made her look up, really look. Her gaze held mine for a long, unguarded moment, the kind that hums in the silence after words run out. Then, slowly, that smile appeared again, softer this time, tinged with something unreadable. "You're bold," she said. "And I like that." It shouldn't have meant much, just a passing comment, a playful remark. But the way she said it, the warmth behind it, made the room feel different. The clock ticked somewhere behind us, the faint sound of wind brushed the curtains, and yet all I could hear was the quiet pulse of my own heartbeat. Claire turned away, pretending to check the oven, her tone lighter now. "You should come by sometime when Ethan's around. He'd want to catch up." I nodded, though I barely heard her. Something in her voice carried a hesitation, the kind that lingers between familiarity and curiosity. As I left, she walked me to the door. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then, with a half-smile, she added, "Be careful with that camera. It tends to capture more than people expect." I smiled back, but as I walked down the steps, I couldn't help thinking she wasn't just talking about the camera. I told myself that day was just a coincidence, that what I felt when she smiled wasn't real, just a passing thought. But a few days later, I found myself driving past Ethan's street for no good reason. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe it was because I wanted to see her again. When I parked outside and knocked, Ethan answered this time, his usual grin in place. Behind him, I caught a glimpse of Claire in the kitchen, her hair pulled back, soft sunlight catching in the strands. She noticed me instantly, and that same knowing warmth flickered in her eyes. "Back again?" she teased gently, drying her hands on a towel as I stepped in. "Returning your son's camera," I said with a grin. She smiled, shaking her head. "He really needs to keep track of his things." There was an ease to her presence, calm, grounded, but underneath it, I felt something stirring. She moved with quiet precision, every motion deliberate. When she handed me a cup of coffee, her fingers brushed mine. It was nothing, a small, accidental touch, yet it sent a pulse of warmth through me that lingered longer than it should have. Ethan excused himself a moment later to take a call outside, leaving the two of us alone in the soft hum of the kitchen. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was alive, filled with small sounds, the tick of the clock, the faint creak of the wooden floor, the steady rhythm of her breathing. She gestured toward the window. "You ever notice how light changes in this room?" she asked. I looked, sunlight spilling over the counter, catching the edge of her sleeve, glowing softly on her skin. It's warmer when you're in it, I said before I could stop myself. Her lips parted slightly, and for a moment she didn't respond. Then she laughed quietly, lowering her gaze. Still bold, I see. I smiled, but the air between us felt different now, charged, fragile. She turned away, pretending to tidy the counter, though I could sense the quiet energy in her every movement. When Ethan came back in, she slipped easily into her usual composure, graceful, composed, unbothered. But when I stood to leave, she reached out to adjust the camera strap over my shoulder, her hand resting for a second longer than necessary. Her touch was light, almost absent-minded, yet it carried something unspoken, a reminder of the distance we both knew existed but neither wanted to enforce. You notice more than you let on, she murmured, her voice low enough that Ethan couldn't hear. I looked at her, really looked, and saw something in her eyes I hadn't before. Not flirtation. Not guilt. Something deeper. Recognition, maybe? When I stepped outside, the door clicked softly behind me, but her words stayed, echoing in my mind like the aftertaste of something sweet, something forbidden. I didn't plan to see her again so soon. But some moments seem to arrange themselves, as if the universe wants to test your composure. It happened at a weekend art exhibit downtown, a small, sunlit gallery filled with the scent of old wood and oil paint. I was there to take a few shots for a freelance project. She was there to simply look, to lose herself among colors and silence. I noticed her before she saw me, standing a few feet away, studying a painting of the ocean at dusk. Her hair was loose, falling softly over her shoulders, a quiet contrast against the blue-gray canvas before her. The look in her eyes wasn't distant, it was searching, almost tender. When she turned and saw me, surprise flashed across her face, followed quickly by that warm, disarming smile. You again, she said lightly, though her voice carried a note of something softer, as if seeing me wasn't just coincidence, but relief. I walked over, trying to keep my tone casual. Guess I've got good timing. We started to wander through the exhibit together, stopping at pieces that caught her attention. She had this way of speaking, deliberate, thoughtful, that made every sentence feel like it carried more meaning than it seemed to. The gallery was quiet, our voices low, blending with the faint echo of footsteps and the hum of distant conversation. When we reached a painting of a single light glowing through rain, she tilted her head. It feels lonely, she said. Or hopeful, I replied. Depends how long you've been standing in the rain. She looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment, I felt the world narrow to that single glance. There was something in her eyes that went beyond curiosity. It was recognition. Understanding. A kind of connection you don't expect to find in someone you shouldn't be thinking about this way. We moved slowly through the rest of the exhibit, talking about life, choices, dreams that had drifted away over time. I noticed the small things, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she laughed, the way her fingers brushed lightly against her necklace when she was thinking. Every gesture felt intimate in a way words could never be. At one point, our hands brushed, just lightly, as we turned to look at the same painting. My breath caught before I could stop it. She noticed. Her lips curved, that same quiet, teasing smile playing there. Still bold? She asked softly. I smiled back, but my voice came out lower than I meant it to. Trying not to be. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. The silence between us wasn't empty, it was alive, electric, filled with everything we couldn't put into words. When she finally looked away, I saw her chest rise with a deep breath, as if steadying herself. And I realized then, this wasn't just attraction anymore. It was something deeper, something neither of us wanted to name, because once we did, we'd never be able to unfeel it. After the art exhibit, neither of us wanted the day to end. She hesitated when I asked if she wanted to grab a coffee nearby, but only for a second, long enough to remind us both that she was thinking it through. Then she nodded, her voice soft. 1 cup. The cafe was tucked into a narrow corner of the street, the kind of place where time moved slower. Light filtered through the windows in lazy, golden strands, dust motes floating in the air like something suspended between past and present. We sat across from each other at a small wooden table, the hum of quiet conversations fading around us. She cupped her coffee with both hands, her fingers slender, graceful. "You know," she said, "I used to come here years ago. When Ethan was little. I'd sit by that window and sketch." "You still draw?" I asked. "Not really," she said, with a faint, almost nostalgic smile. "Life got busy. I guess some things just get left behind." There was something about the way she said it, that soft regret, that made me want to know everything she'd ever given up. I leaned forward slightly, lowering my voice. "Do you ever miss it?" She looked at me for a long moment, as if weighing the honesty of the question. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But it's easier to forget what you miss than to remember what you can't have." Her words hit me deeper than I expected. Maybe because I felt the same about her. I hesitated, fingers tracing the rim of my cup. "I get that," I said quietly. "Sometimes I think I'm chasing things that don't even make sense anymore. Or people I probably shouldn't." That made her look up sharply. The space between us seemed to shrink. She studied my face, as though searching for something she hoped not to find. "You shouldn't say things like that," she murmured. "Why not?" I asked, my voice soft but steady. Her gaze lingered on mine, and I could see the battle happening behind her eyes, reason clashing with feeling. "Because honesty like that," she said finally, "is dangerous." For a moment neither of us moved. The air between us grew heavy, alive. The faint sound of the rain starting outside mixed with the soft rhythm of her breath. She reached for her bag as if to stand, then stopped, caught halfway between leaving and staying. "You remind me," she whispered, almost to herself, "that some feelings never really go away. They just wait for someone brave enough to notice them." Her eyes lifted, meeting mine once more, open, vulnerable, and afraid of being understood. I didn't touch her, didn't move closer. But in that quiet, charged space, I think we both felt it, that something fragile and beautiful had just been spoken into existence, even if either of us dared to name it. The evening it happened, rain had been threatening all day, the kind that waits on the horizon, building in silence. I'd promised Ethan I'd drop off his laptop charger, but when I reached the house, his car wasn't there. Still, I rang the bell. Claire answered, framed by the soft amber light spilling from inside. Her sweater sleeves were pushed up, a few strands of hair falling loose from her bun. "Ethan's out," she said, a little surprised to see me. Then, after a pause, "You'll get drenched if you stand out there. Come in." The warmth of the house enveloped me instantly. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and rain-soaked wood. She motioned toward the living room. "You can wait for him if you like." The storm broke moments later, a low rumble, then a wash of sound as rain poured against the windows. Claire sighed softly, glancing toward the glass. "Well, looks like you're stuck here for a while." I smiled. "Could be worse." She returned it, a small, knowing smile, before settling on the couch with a book. I sat across from her, trying not to stare, but it was impossible not to notice the way the lamplight softened her features, the way her hand absently turned a page but her eyes weren't really reading. The silence wasn't awkward. It was careful. Every small sound, the rain, the ticking clock, the shifting of fabric, felt magnified. I finally broke it, my voice quieter than I meant. "Do you ever regret being too careful?" Her gaze lifted from the book, meeting mine. "All the time," she said softly. For a long moment, the world outside disappeared, just rain and breath and the hum of something unsaid. She set the book down and folded her legs beneath her, turning slightly toward me. "What about you?" "I try not to," I said. "But sometimes, being careful feels like pretending." Her lips parted, but no words came. The only sound was the rain, drumming steadily against the glass. Then, without quite realizing how, I leaned forward, just enough for the space between us to feel smaller, alive. Her hand rested on the armrest between us, and when my fingers brushed hers, barely, she didn't move. The touch was light, tentative, but the air shifted instantly. She exhaled, a faint tremor in her breath. "You shouldn't," she whispered. "Probably not," I said quietly. She didn't pull away. Instead, she turned her hand slightly, letting our fingers stay close, not holding, just there. Present. Real. After what felt like forever, she stood, walking to the window. Her reflection glowed faintly in the glass, softened by the light. "You make things feel alive again," she said, her voice almost lost beneath the rain. When I finally left, the storm had eased, but my pulse hadn't. Her words replayed over and over, not as a confession, but as a truth neither of us could take back. Days passed after that evening, but the silence between us felt louder than ever. Neither of us reached out. Neither of us had to. It was as though the memory of that night, the rain, her words, the way our fingers barely touched, had left an invisible thread hanging between us, tugging at both ends no matter how far we tried to pull away. I told myself to let it fade. She probably did too. But when I saw her again, everything I'd tried to bury came rushing back. It was late afternoon when I drove by their place and found her outside, tending to the garden. The sky was clear this time, soft sunlight brushing over her skin. She wore a loose white blouse and old jeans, her hair tied back, a faint smudge of soil on her wrist. She didn't notice me at first. I stood by the gate for a moment, just watching, not out of admiration, but something deeper. There was peace in the way she moved, a rhythm that felt like home. When she finally looked up, surprise flickered across her face, followed by that familiar, gentle smile. "You again," she said softly, wiping her hands on a towel. "Thought I'd return Ethan's charger this time," I joked, holding it up. She laughed quietly, a sound that seemed to make the whole afternoon softer. "You're persistent," she said, her tone warm, but beneath it, I could sense something else. The same hesitation I felt. The same unspoken pull. Without asking, I joined her by the flower beds, crouching down to help her replant a few herbs. Our hands brushed in the dirt once, twice, each time lingering a little longer. Neither of us mentioned it. The silence between us said enough. After a while, she sat back, brushing her palms together. "You shouldn't keep showing up here like this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Would you rather I didn't?" I asked. She didn't answer. The sunlight caught in her hair, and she looked away, eyes fixed on the petals swaying in the breeze. "This has to stop," she said finally. "Before it becomes something neither of us can explain." I nodded slowly, though my chest ached at the words. "It already is something," I said quietly. Her head turned, not sharply, but with a kind of sorrowful surprise. "You really are bold," she murmured. "And you make it hard to be sensible." I wanted to reach for her, not to pull her closer, but to let her know I understood. Instead, I stood still, the space between us filled with everything we weren't saying. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of lavender. She looked down at her hands, then at me, her eyes soft, conflicted, almost shining. "You should go," she said finally, but it didn't sound like she meant it. As I turned to leave, her voice followed quietly. "You're going to make someone very happy someday." Weeks passed after that afternoon in the garden, but something about the silence between us felt different this time. It wasn't avoidance, it was acceptance. Like two waves that had touched just once before returning to the sea, each carrying a trace of the other within them. I still thought about her, of course. About the way she'd look at me as if seeing something she hadn't allowed herself to see in years. About the softness in her voice when she said I made things feel alive again. But there was no ache to it anymore, just gratitude. It was early September when I saw her again. The summer air had thinned, a coolness whispering through the evenings. I was walking home from the bookstore when I noticed her car parked by the cafe where we'd once talked. She was sitting by the window, a book open in front of her, a half-empty cup of tea at her side. For a moment, I hesitated on the sidewalk, unsure if I should go in. Then she looked up, as if she'd felt me there, and smiled. That same gentle, knowing smile that had started it all. Inside, the cafe smelled of coffee and quiet music. She stood as I approached, and for a brief second, I caught the faint shimmer of emotion in her eyes. Not regret. Not longing. Just the calm recognition of two people who'd walked the edge of something beautiful and survived it with their hearts intact. I was hoping I'd see you, she said softly. You look well. So do you, I replied, meaning it. We talked easily, about small things, safe things. Ethan had gotten a new job. She was taking art classes again. She even showed me a photo of a sketch she'd done of the ocean, the same one we'd once stood in front of at the gallery. The lines were delicate, confident. Alive. You started drawing again, I said, smiling. She nodded. I realized some parts of me were just waiting for a reason to wake up again. For a moment, silence stretched between us, not heavy, but full. She reached across the table then, her hand brushing mine. The touch was warm, familiar, and steady. You were right, she said. Sometimes boldness is exactly what we need, even if it only lasts for a moment. I didn't say anything. I just let her hand rest there, memorizing the way it felt, not as something forbidden, but as something honest. When she finally stood to leave, she lingered by the door, the late afternoon sun catching her hair. She turned back, smiling once more. Take care of yourself, all right? You too, I said. And then she was gone, into the gentle rhythm of the street, into a life that would keep moving forward. As I watched her walk away, I realized that not every connection is meant to be held. Some are meant to awaken you, to remind you that life is still capable of surprising you, of stirring something deep and wordless inside you.